These nerds. This is a little bit of a different video. It's more of a discussion than anything with another YouTuber and streamer called Painting Badly. So, check out his content as well. We're going to be discussing the archival stuff. I asked in the Discord for some questions that people wanted to know. And yeah, first question is going to be, greetings, nerds. I'm joined by Painting Badly from Twitch and YouTube, where he paints badly.
Terribly.
Awful. Awful painter.
Just the worst.
Highly
yes.
don't recommend. You can catch me there most of mom jokes. Yeah. Anyways, we're discussing how to be archival, because this is a thing that a lot of people don't know, and it's very lost in the miniature painting spaces. Now, we're going to be tackling a lot of questions with and answers for canvas painting. However, it does apply to painting on plastic as well, your little toy soldiers. So just, keep an open mind, because a lot of practices that you all do aren't very archival. They're good for the short term, but not good for the long term. One example here is that a very common practice that I've joined a lot of Patreons. This is a common practice to get this really cool effect, is you paint acrylics over oil. This is not something you should do. Acrylics are water-based, and that means they'll delaminate and they won't be able to adhere properly over an oil paint.
You'll also hurt the polymerization of the oil too,
which is a major thing.
Yeah.
Now we're going to be tackling one question here. Two questions, but we'll do the second question at the end here. But the first question is going to be let's see. It's what pigments don't play nicely with each other, like if a pigment blackens in contact with another, or is there action when mixed with all pigments?
Yeah, there, in the context of modern pigments and what's commonly sold and used, pigments mixing with each other and causing discoloration, I am not aware of any standard one. Essentially, there have been pigments in the past, like I've heard of, like I believe specifically the arsenic-based paints, like historical paints, like Realgar and Orpiment discoloring, I think, and I think Vermilion had also, which is a mercury-based paint that would discolor with certain other ones. But in the context of what's currently used in the modern context, I cannot think of a single one when two pigments mix together that they discolor. It's something I think is not something to really be overly concerned with, versus like, pigments that affect the other aspects of like affecting the oil film, or how things dry, like the quickness of drying, which is a double-edged sword, or just environmental issues with the pigments. So there might be some modern pigments that might discolor from certain environmental effects or getting exposed to certain things. But even those are still not very common.
With the exception of Prussian blue, when it's exposed to an alkaline environment, it will turn green.
Right.
Yeah.
But with like oil paints, there might be some that if you like put them in a room of like a ton of sulfur exposure, might, but other than that, I can't think of it. Like outside of the fact, like, with certain, like, linseed oil can yellow, right? Mm-hmm. So over time that could yellow, but that's not because of the pigment. That's because of the oil. Now some pigments yellow more, like titanium white also has a history of yellowing with linseed oil, more so than other oils. But that's not due to another pigment. It's just like an ingrained property in the pigment itself.
Yeah. With the metal pigment, the only ones you have to be concerned about is mixing copper and aluminum. That creates galvanic corrosion. And that is an oil paint as well. Both do exist. Gamblin makes them. So
yeah, that's something. Yeah, your video on that was very interesting. But yeah, I don't use. I'm painting impressionistically. I'm painting for realism. So those are pigment areas that I never go into.
yeah, that's something that I was curious about, and they just
Yeah,
that's really the only thing
that
you
was
have to worry
super
about.
interesting though. That like you would think they would take better ways to mitigate it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are ways to like also package those where it wouldn't be an issue. But
Oh yeah. Well, that wasn't Gamblin who did it that way. It was Old Holland who, bless their
of course,
heart.
bless their hearts, those fuckers.
Exactly. uh, God, how stupid do you have to be to do that?
It's you'd be surprised on what people just overlook or not even think about. But it's also a sign of the company not doing due diligence. It's either them cheapening out and thinking it doesn't matter, or it doesn't affect it. I'm actually willing to bet they think they were under the impression that wouldn't affect enough of it to matter.
Yeah. Well, it did matter because I have 15 tubes here of brass pigment paint, and it's corroded.
Yeah.
So, at least Let's Call uses plastic bottles.
Yep.
But don't mix the aluminum with the brass or the copper ones. That's it. And that's the end of that question. Does the surface influence what factors you care about for longevity? Like if you are painting on a rigid board instead of a canvas, do you still care if the dried paint remains flexible, or a harder film is more important? Or is a harder film more important? Greetings, nerds. And the card.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So with regards to surfaces, all right. The longevity of the surface obviously varies by material, right? So a lot of classical or older paintings were painted on wood, some canvas, cotton now, and then there's materials like copper and aluminum that are also have some history. But so when you're painting on harder surfaces, having a durable paint film is still just important, because the amount of force that is exhibited on a oil film is not like, we're not talking about it being able to hold up to somebody like punching it or like hitting it with a hammer. We're talking about smaller amounts of forces over periods of time. So like the issues with canvases, right, is they de-strain over time, they're less taut, and it will start to sag, among other things it can do, which puts a force on the oil film. Okay. This is also not to mention that you get expansion and detraction from cold and hot temperatures, which affects everything, right? Also not to mention like water and pressure in the air. So when there's like, it's in like a more pressurized air, or higher like ambient pressure versus lower ambient pressure, all these exert forces on the oil film. And that includes on harder surfaces. So on wood, for example, wood is greatly affected by the amount of moisture in the air and heat and temperature, maybe even more so than a canvas does. Now, wood doesn't necessarily de-stress over time, but what it can do is warp heavily and really strain the paint layer. So it is just as important on harder surfaces. And if we're talking about like the highest amount of longevity you can have for a painting, would be very durable oil like linseed oil on like aluminum or copper in an environmentally controlled rooms, because like we know, copper, especially copper and aluminum, can both degrade from the environmental aspects, which would can also create stresses on the oil paint film. And there's always going to be some type of like micro forces happening, whether it be a slight vibration from the room, um, a multitude of things. So there's never like I will say there's never really a time where I would condone saying, "Oh yeah, using like zinc white here will be perfectly fine." Or not using using materials that don't interact with the oil well is the better option. It's kind of one of those things you always ought to, especially if you care about longevity. I mean, if you care about longevity, you always ought to use things that will make your painting the most robust. Okay. So, the modulus of elasticity is a material property that every material has, and it's used a lot in engineering when understanding the properties of material. And it's a numerical way of measuring it. So, stuff that is commonly used is like tensile strength, right? When you like pull something apart, right? How long will it last? And there's different ways to define a material strength by that. There's also the shear force. That's where it's like coming across it, right? So those are kind of like things. Well, those are things that we measure using different like machines and testing. So if we had a graph, right, an XY graph, and one of these was like the force, or this is, or sorry, distance of elongation, and this is the force. So y would be the, let me, and this might not be exactly what it is, but I'm just giving you the, um, the general idea of this graph. And down here would be like elongation or what's it, deformation of the material. So like, if you were bending a piece of gum or like you were like stretching out a piece of gum, that's like elongation and deformation, right? But so what happens is almost all materials will have basically like a straight line, and this is called the modulus of elasticity, okay? And basically this is how much force and deformation a material can go through before it permanently gets deformed, okay? So you know how when you could bend a paper clip slightly, right? And it'll
Yeah.
go back to its original place, right?
Mhm.
That means you have not exceeded this modulus of elasticity of the force required to permanently bend it. But once you get to a point, okay, it will permanently deform, right? And that's when you exceed this amount. But then what happens is you have this area, and it will usually, and sometimes it'll even come lower, like this, below it, where you have this area where put more force on it and it bends more, but it's still holding on until you get a point where it stops. And this is the point where it breaks permanently. Okay. And so this area underneath this graph is considered to be the toughness of the material, because it took all this amount of force, because this is, now we're getting into calculus, the area under the graph is the total amount of force needed to permanently break something. So what you're seeing here is actually kind of like how steel would be, a super high modulus of elasticity and very tough, because there's a lot of area underneath this graph, okay? But what is like glass? Like, glass doesn't really deform, right?
Yeah.
It just breaks. So glass will literally just be like that, and it'll just break, right? Because you exceeded the modulus of elasticity. Now, the modulus of elasticity might be like for glass, or concrete is another example that are like this. Concrete doesn't bend; it just cracks. So it might just be like kind of like that, right? So when we're talking about what zinc, titanium white, and lead does, so what lead does is lead gives you a pretty it's like a less steep line, but it has a good amount of force required to permanently deform it, but it gives you a lot of movement, the elongation, deformation. It gives you a lot of leeway here, and then even when it does deform, it gives you a good amount of area past this, before it actually breaks. And this is what lead white does to oil. So it makes it tougher. It makes it tougher while providing a good amount of strength. Before something really bad happens, right? Now, what zinc does, and this is the graph I saw from Rublev, zinc is more like glass. So it actually will take more to actually deform it. But but this is, don't get me wrong, this is relative to like paint on canvas. And then it'll be like this. Very little. But this is why zinc is bad. It makes it very brittle. So forces can affect it, cause it to crack, right? What titanium white is like this. Titanium white was much lower than both of them, and probably more like this. This is relative to what I saw, and not tough at all. That was how titanium white dries in oil. So zinc makes it much harder, right? So the forces needed to make it crack would be higher than like titanium white or lead. But the problem is once you exceed it, it just cracks, right? Lead takes a good amount of force to do so. And then even when it does, you have a lot of leeway of toughness where it really won't break or destroy itself. Titanium white, lower on both ends. It's the modulus of elasticity, and it's not tough. It's a very weak oil film. And like with all the metrics that you measure this by. So
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
yeah. So this is used like I said, there are millions of man hours dedicated to people. There are people whose entire job is to create alloys for other things, right? And measure and then just get all the properties of it. So they'll create like a new alloy with like an additional 0.2% of nickel, right, with aluminum or something like that. And then they'll measure all these properties because frankly, one of the biggest discoveries that humans could make is basically making aluminum with the properties of the mechanical properties of steel or like titanium. Right, like that would be legitimately one of the biggest discoveries in humanity. What we could do if we had that light of a material with that type of strength. It would change the game, so to speak. But point being, every college does research. People do their thesis statements on specific alloys and materials. But it applies to everything. Plastics have this, so like plastics in this would be very tough, right, before they actually break apart, but they deform very easily, right? Glass, concrete, something that just like explodes, it doesn't bend, it just breaks, something that cracks easily, straight, or that's how we describe brittle versus softer.
All right. Yeah.
There's your engineering lesson for the day.
Yeah. And I will